I'm here as ever with my dear friend Richard. Hello, Richard.
Andy, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. All the better for seeing you, sir.
And I gather you've now moved downstairs for some technical thing.
Yes, we've now moved downstairs because the laptop was uh, aged, might be the correct term. And I know we like people who are wiser and older, but in technology terms, not so good.
Yes, we may improve, but technology probably not.
No. No. So what was happening? We were doing interviews, and basically what would happen was, thank you. What would happen was we ended up with crackling, and crackling is nice to eat occasionally if it's made in Wolverhampton from pigs, but it's not so good in your ear.
Fair enough. Anyway, things are better now.
Things are much better. It's all relaxing. It's good. Right. So we every week we talk about medical issues, hot topics in the news. Every so often we'll stop and do your questions for Dr. Richard Scott GP, a family practitioner if you're not in the UK. And Richard looks around at what's going on. We get your suggestions every so often, and we love your suggestions. So if you've seen a topic in the news and you're thinking, what's the real deal with this? You can send that to us, and we'll try and help you. So, Richard, what are we looking at this week?
Yeah, well, as you know, I scan different papers to get different materials, and I came across this great article subtitled "How God Struck Gold in Paris at the Paris Olympics," but rather nicely titled. In fact, I rather wish I had thought of this: "The Way, the Truth, and the Olympics." So, a variation on the way, the truth, and the life. How God struck gold in Paris. And so I thought, well, I'm going to read that, and it's written in a normal secular newspaper. So I'm thinking, this is bold of them. I wonder what they're going to come up with. So it's funny how God works. As it happens, normally I like on a Sunday Times to get the Sunday Times. Sorry, on a Sunday to get the Sunday Times because it does the best sport. I like the rest of the paper, but the sport's particularly my interest. Anyway, I get there to the shop too late. No Sunday Times, but there is an Observer, which is my number two go-to. So I get the Observer instead. And whenever that happens, because it's not that common, I always think, I bet God's got something for me. There's a reason why the Sunday Times ran out. So I'm reading through this newspaper, and sure enough, here comes the article, which obviously wouldn't have been in the Sunday Times. And the subtitle is the sort of subtitle is that athletes no longer need to be silent about their faith and how their faith is increasingly impacting their approach to sport. So I thought, we've just had the Olympics, Paralympics, I gather, start a week yesterday. So Paralympics are coming. We've just had the Olympics. So something on sport would seem to be topical for our listeners. Anyway, so I'm reading this article, and it's a good one. It started with England's top breaststroke swimmer, Adam Peaty. Now, I quite particularly like Adam Peaty because my daughter used to live in Uttoxeter, and Adam Peaty is Uttoxeter's most famous son. In fact, if you go to the big Tesco's in Uttoxeter, there's a huge cardboard cutout of Adam Peaty, just in case you didn't know he came from that. Anyway, as we know, our greatest, the greatest breaststroke swimmer, something like 17 out of the top 20 times ever. He's got double gold. He was going for triple gold, and he lost by 2/100ths of a second. Oh. Yet he was smiling. Now, we did a thing, didn't we, a few weeks ago, looking at how usually people who get a bronze in the Olympics are much happier than those who get silver. Bronzes are happy to be on the podium. Silvers are gutted that they didn't get gold. Not Adam Peaty. He was really happy. And he said this, in fact, because he was stripped off just having swum, there's a huge cross over his torso. He says, I'm a very religious man. He said, I'm asked God just to show my heart, and this is my heart. I couldn't have done more. Now, Peaty in the last few years has become a Christian, and he was not always like this. In fact, he was famous for his red mist, the temper that comes down, obscures everything else. But his newfound Christian faith has changed him. In fact, the article goes on to say there's been a very heavenly air in the aquatic centre at the Paris Olympics. I'll give you more. British diver Andrea, almost unpronounceable surname, Spendolini-Siriex, daughter of the famous Fred from the TV, got bronze in the synchronized diving. Promptly states, I give glory to God. And the same words were spoken by the American Alison Gibson in an individual diving event. The new 100-meter women's breaststroke champion from South Africa, Tatiana Smith, gets out of the pool, puts on a T-shirt, thanking God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. This is just in the aquatic centre, 10,000 miles away in Tahiti. I think people may know that the surfing took place in Tahiti. It's not great in Paris. So there's the surfing taking place, another wave of religious fervour. Gabriel Medina pointed skywards after getting gold with the highest score ever, and his pointing skywards became one of the iconic photos of the games because he posted alongside it a quote, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me," straight from the Bible. So the article goes on to say, and this is the bit I liked particularly, sportsmen and women thanking God is nothing new, but what is new is the sheer number doing so at the Olympics, especially notable, I might add, in France, which has insisted its own athletes can't get involved because they must uphold the country's secular laws. Well, all I can say is it seems that God had another plan. And given the punishing regimes that athletes must endure and the odds stacked against them in pursuit of glory, by the way, nice little stat, what percentage of people who go to the Olympics don't get a medal? The answer is 92%. So not only do most people not get to the Olympics, more than 9 in 10 don't get a medal. If they do get to the Olympics, there's a massive odds against success. So given this, it's perhaps not surprising, the article went on to say, that they look outside themselves to a greater power. But social media, whose dangers, of course, I was highlighting last week, has a good side, allowing these athletes to be bolder in expressing their faith, with fans becoming increasingly comfortable too. Now, not long ago, broadcasters would have shut down too much God talk. Today, and this is nice, it's seen as part of the athletes, in inverted commas, journey. The greatest gymnast, isn't it? The greatest gymnast ever, Simone Biles. And if any of you have not seen her performance on the floor, oh my goodness, it's just breathtakingly astonishing. These people are superhuman. Anyway, the greatest gymnast ever has a rosary tucked away in her duffel bag. Now, she may not have been overtly wearing it, but TikTok knew all about it. It therefore must exist. So now, just coming into land, the International Olympic Committee has strict rules about keeping religious and political statements off the podium. Fine, but they can't prevent an athlete crossing herself at the start of a race or kneeling down at the finish. This games, the Brazilian skateboarder Racer Leal, great name Racer. Can you imagine being called Racer? Rayssa. That's a good name for an athlete. Skateboarder stole a moment in front of the camera to cite a Bible verse in sign language before going on to win bronze. And the article went on to say, remember, not a Christian writing this, does that count as proselytizing or just being her authentic self? I'd like to quote research, as we do in this program, Graham Daniels. Actually, here's a guy that you might like to interview. I've not met him, but I've heard of him. Graham Daniels, General Director of Christians in Sport, has done some research which shows a marked rise in integration of faith and sport in the last 20 years. One of the key drivers is obviously society's shift towards protecting and respecting religious identities of all kinds, because sport claims, and should be, not always, but should be, inclusive and should visibly accept all faiths. Anyway, it's growing at the professional level. Now, this doesn't just apply to Christians. Prominent Muslim cricketers in the UK speak about their faith, and this month, apparently, saw the inaugural UK Sikh Games. There's a younger generation of athletes who are more comfortable showing their faith. But in Euro 2024, Andy and I have talked about this previously, 4 members of the England squad are prominent Christians. That's never happened in my lifetime, I might say, all my years. For example, after he was man of the match in the quarter-final win against Switzerland, Bukayo Saka, our right winger, plays for Arsenal, was asked, how? He said, I have faith in God. Good answer. Tony, our substitute, our big centre-forward substitute, has the 10 Commandments tattooed on his back. That must have hurt.
Yes.
That's a few words in the 10 Commandments. Anyway, well done, Ivan. He's a big bloke. He's got a big enough back to get all the words on, I guess. Mark Gahey, who's our new good centre-back, his dad is a lay preacher. He's also Christian. Previous squad members, Raheem Sterling, for example, quotes Bible verses, and Marcus Rashford's faith is shown in his activism. So it's obvious how also in team sports, faith can help bond players. Rugby teams from the Pacific Islands have long prayed together before games, and Andy and I again mentioned this previously, in the aftermath of their team's defeat to Kenya in the Rugby Sevens in the Olympics, the Samoan team led a prayer huddle with their victors in the middle of the pitch, as you do. Fantastic. As I finish, for some people, this is all too much. Others might see it as just superstition or maybe even a coping strategy to cope with the stresses of high-level sport. Just one of a raft of different psychological coping strategies. Others may be thinking, well, it's just another way of getting a competitive edge. But, and this is the writer writing, not me, given the sorry state of the sports industry, with its bloated self-importance, pursuit of greed, completely out of control money, and moral ambivalence, perhaps there's something laudable, something good about athletes looking for wider perspective. And I think for us, Andy, it's just an encouragement. This is happening at the top end of sport. The climate has changed. Why don't we, ordinary listeners, ordinary people, ordinary mortals, can't do what Simone Biles does, but why don't we see if we can widen this crack to the rest of life's environments?
Interesting stuff. I was quickly, as you were saying something, I remembered seeing an athlete who I started to follow. She's a swimmer, maybe the same one you mentioned, but she's got married. Tatiana Schoenmaker.
I guess it's the same Tatiana. Yeah, right.
And on the top of her Instagram page, it says sports person, next line down, all glory to God.
That's a good summary.
It doesn't get much better than that. And I love how she has been very, very over and obvious. I am a Christian. It's part of who I am. I cannot simply eradicate this part of myself in order to do sport. And I like that. Eric Liddell very famously refused to run on a Sunday, going back to a much earlier Olympic Games. And I think there is a thing about, it's been fascinating. I'm trying not to get political. It's been interesting to watch what's gone on in France with politics in affecting and infecting perhaps sport. And I love how people are saying, I am a Christian. I cannot remove that from myself.
Yeah. And it's a thing that we say, for example, to doctors, is that, doctors who are Christians, like myself, you don't suddenly take off your Christianity as you enter the consulting room.
No.
And a sportsman doesn't take off his Christianity as he enters the 100 meters or the swimming pool or the diving. No, this is who we are. And people who insist on us taking it off, of course, are just betraying their own faith position. Everyone has a faith position,
Yeah.
And your faith position may be atheism, may be agnosticism, but if you're a Christian, we should be able to wear it with pride.
Yes, I think so. And it's been interesting to see athletes who are saying, you know what, this is who I am. And effectively they're saying, tough, if you don't like it, don't really care.
I'll tell you a lovely story. I had a guy come in to see me. This is years ago now. He was one of my patients. I was seeing him regularly. And he came in one day and said, I don't like your waiting room. I said, just thinking back to what's wrong with our waiting room? Like the chairs? What is it? He said, no, I don't like that. But actually, I knew where he was coming from. I don't like your notice board, which talks about, because it was, particularly in those days, a Christian practice. He said, I'm a Jew and I don't like your notice board. I said, look, I don't want to be rude, but tough. This is a Christian practice. And let me tell you something. You won't stop coming because you get good care. And he said, fair play. So he may not have liked the message, but he liked the result. And of course, the result stems from the message.
Yeah. And I think that's been seen time and time again, isn't it? People say, we'll get rid of the Christianity. Well, this nation would fall.
Absolutely fall. Quite right.
I think it was Andy Hawthorne I know I keep mentioning this same breakfast stat from a long time ago, but Andy Hawthorne, who is set at the Message Trust, he talks about how they're never going to take out of their prison work the fact that they are Christians. Without Jesus, it doesn't work. And I think that's really valid. You cannot just remove Christianity and somehow all's good. Now we can be neutral. It is literally impossible.
And there is no neutral stance.
No.
I'm afraid there isn't a neutral stance because everybody believes in something, whether it's science, whether it's yourself, whether it's money, everybody believes in something. And and actually what Christianity offers is something so much greater than all these things.
Yeah, it is. I was really encouraged when I first met, the first encounter online, Tatia from the South Africa, because she was really quite bold about her faith, and it's really encouraging to see the French Olympic Games, so many athletes saying, you know what, this is who I am. And I think it's a really important message, especially for young people, that you can be a Christian. And if you are a Christian, you can't just eradicate that from who you are in order to be this thing, because like you said, Richard, you can't be neutral. It is literally impossible. If you don't believe in God, you believe in something. Well, that something is going to affect who you are. And removing Christianity from you as an athlete is like not breathing, quite honestly.
Absolutely. So yeah, I was very encouraged. So when I saw that article, I couldn't resist.
No.
In fact, I've got an article next week on the Paralympics from a slightly different angle. And so, yeah, I just think we've got to talk about these things. Clearly, they're entering the newspapers for a reason, because of the timing. Well, actually, we'd be foolish not to plug into what people are saying.
Yeah, and I think this is right, because I keep on saying, but you can't remove Christianity from who you are. And like you said, you cannot just be neutral. It's impossible. And this idea of a secular society, well, a secular society isn't neutral either. Actually, it's even more over religious, although they would refute that. But you can't be neutral.
No, absolutely. So yeah, I was very encouraged, and it's nice to have a few examples as well, rather than to say, well, there's been a lot of faith around. So here's this woman who's written this article in the Observer, who's actually done the hard work for me, found the examples, written them down. Thank you very much.
Yes,
and I'm simply passing them on.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I'm just going to leave that there. Really, it's encouraging to see people who are saying, you know what, I'm a Christian and I don't care. It's fine. It's all good. Right, Richard. That's a nice simple one. We'll leave that on as it is, I think. So more for next week. If you want to ask any questions to Richard, or you want to come back on our thoughts on athletes and Christianity, if you've got any hot topics to do that, you can do that to our email, hello@pure247radio.org. hello@pure247radio.org. And I will see you again for more next week, Richard.
All the best.
Thank you.
Here at Pure 24/7 Radio, we have had the privilege of speaking to some amazing people with amazing stories.
So I was already doing the work of an evangelist, and then I discovered that there was a term for it. And then I realized, well, I really wanted to learn more about the Bible and Christianity. So I went to theological college.
Most people think that my life as a marine biologist was spent riding on the back of a dolphin into the sunset.
That's my view.
Yeah, I did that. Never.
Been on the road 35 years, man and boy, doing magic and comedy to communicate the gospel. When I started off in 88, I was doing escapology. I kind of took that on from a friend of mine called Pete Gilbert, who was a real pioneer in creative communication.
If you have missed any of these interviews or would like to hear them again, you can. Simply head over to our catch-up section at www.pure247radio.org. That's www.pure247radio.org.